This is the BYD Atto 3, one of the latest electric cars to come to the Australian market. It's not here just yet, however. We've got an evaluation vehicle from BYD. We've asked them if we can have a quick sneak peek and a test drive of this car. It is left-hand drive, and this is a Chinese market car. In fact, proper Australian delivered right-hand drive models will be getting here at around the middle of the year. And they're going to be priced from $44,790 before on-road costs. It's approximately the size of a medium SUV. That's a bit over 4.4 meters long. There's room for 5 inside there. And you've got a driving range that starts at 320 kilometers between recharges. Now you can opt for a larger battery and a larger driving range. That's going to cost you around $3,000 more, and that's going to get you up to 420 kilometers of driving range. The interesting thing about this car is that it is left-hand drive, so it's a little bit tricky to drive on our roads here in Australia, but we are able to get an initial taste of what this BYD Atto 3 is going to bring to the Australian market. Plus, we can give you an idea of how it drives, how it rides, and what that interior is like. How comfortable is it? How spacious is it? And what kind of technology it has as well. So let's go and have a look at this new BYD Atto 3. This is the interior of the Atto 3, and it is quite interesting. But first things first, I want to show you the big party trick of this car. You've got a big infotainment display here, 12.8 inches in size. Now that doesn't have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto initially for the Australian market. It uses something called D-Link instead. I haven't had any luck with it myself in this test. We'll find out more about that down the track. But BYD did tell us that Apple CarPlay and Android Auto should be coming to the Atto 3 later on in the year. But check this out, I reckon this will impress your friends. Button down here, and it rotates. So it goes from portrait to landscape and back. It's a pretty cool trick, and I suppose it does have a little bit of benefit as well. Some people will prefer to have it in a different orientation. Maybe if you're doing navigation and that sort of thing, you'd prefer to have that direction going so you can see what's going on a little bit more. But overall, this interior, first things first, the build quality does seem to be quite good. I've been prodding and pulling and feeling my way around this interior at the moment, and it does seem quite well made. Now there is a bit of a caveat there. This is a left-hand drive model for the Chinese market. We are getting a right-hand drive model, obviously in Australia, made for the Australian market. It's in the same factory as what this one is made, but on a different production line. So the build quality might vary around. We're going to hold our judgment until we get into an actual Australian production model. But the overall look of this thing, I really respect that BYD hasn't necessarily gone with the same generic look as other car manufacturers out there. This is very unique. It's curving, it's not as minimalist as others, I suppose, but it's pretty cool, I think. There's a few interesting things going on. These air vents have a design that I haven't seen before. This dashboard, it's meant to resemble like muscles or tendons or something like that. It's got these lumps happening and it's all a bit curved. The materials feel nice, and practicality, it does seem okay as well. You've got a wireless charging pad here. This is your gear shifter. There's a bunch of controls here going on. These are all in Chinese symbols, obviously, but on this side, you've got your heating and ventilation controls. There is a volume switch there as well, driving modes, a couple of parking aids, and that is your engine, or not engine, your car stop start button there, and an electric parking brake. A couple of cup holders there, nothing too interesting going on. One of them does have a removable bottom, so you can change the depth of the cup holder. And then there is a center console in there. There's a few things going on the inside of there. Apparently in the Chinese market, you can get a microphone that plugs in there so you can do karaoke while you're driving. I only hope that comes to the Australian model. That would be pretty cool. In terms of the steering wheel, you've got some controls on here. It does have a nice leather wrap in the same color that you'll see along the dashboard and a few other places on the car. And there is a small display here mounted on the steering column itself, and that is effectively your instrument cluster instead of your more traditional one up on the dashboard here. And that's just got your basic readouts there. You've got a power readout, how much range you've got left, your speed, and all your different driving modes. And it also has a readout there for how many kilowatts you're putting out and how many you're pulling back into the car under regenerative braking and that sort of thing. But that seems to work quite well. It's definitely not a big display. It hasn't got a whole lot going on there, but it's a nice simple way of getting the information across to you while you're driving. Other things to talk about here, the door opening mechanism. This is pretty interesting actually. I don't think I've ever seen another car with a design like this, but you might not be able to see it where you are there, but it's up here. It's mounted actually onto a speaker, and it kind of looks like an armrest or something like that, but you pull it like that, opens the door, and it shuts. It's quite interesting, it's quite different, and it works well, and I just sort of appreciate that BYD has done something a little bit different and been a little bit audacious with the way they've designed the interior of this car. You've also got some strange strings down here. They actually play notes, and they look kind of like a guitar, but they help keep your stuff in the door cards there. The door cards will fit a bottle and probably not a lot else, but the main storage you have in this car, you don't notice straight away, it's actually underneath the center console here. So you've got a couple of USB points down there. I think there is also a 12-volt plug, yep, just on that side, but there's a bit of room under there as well for something like a small handbag or something like that. There's not a heap of space there, but that's where you would stick your bulkier items while you're driving around. But overall, I'm impressed with this BYD, I have to say, from the interior. It does have a bit of value for money going on. There's a lot of specification in this car for the asking price, and initial build quality does seem good. We will hold our verdict though until we see the final finished product, but first impressions, so far it's pretty interesting. Now let's go have a look in the second row. It's a less glamorous consideration overall, but I think it's an extremely important one, and that is the size of the second row, especially for an SUV that might be used for the family duties, and that's something where the BYD Atto 3 is actually quite good. You can see here I've got a load of space around my knees and my toes and my feet. That's my driving position up front there, but there is loads of room here. You'll also notice that the floor is completely flat. That's because this car isn't designed with a traditional petrol or diesel powertrain in mind. This is an electric only platform. BYD use their own batteries in these cars, and it's called a blade design, and there's a lot of information for the real tech heads to dig into in that regard, but one thing that's worth mentioning with these batteries is that they are shaped thin and long, so they are kind of built right into the subframe of this car overall, and there's no need for a transmission tunnel. So the person in the middle here doesn't have their knees up around their chin if they're sitting there. It's got a nice low flat floor, and overall space and comfort is really good in this Atto 3. A few other features we've got here, we've got air vents, we've got a couple of USB power outlets there, and there is a tiny little storage slot in the back of the center console there as well. The back of these seats have a mat pocket plus a couple of smaller ones, and you've got the same funky sort of guitar design there, so you can play some music while you're putting your drinks away in the door pocket there. And of course you've got this same funky design of the door opening. One thing I didn't notice actually up front there is you do have a sunroof in this car, and if I try and open it now, it actually goes a fair way back here. It doesn't open, the sunroof doesn't open, but you do have glass that goes all the way back here into the second row, which I think is helpful. I know that the kids always love this sort of thing when they're driving around, just to see what's up above them. Typical for most vehicles of this size, if you fit 3 adults in the back here, you might be starting to run out of things like hip room and shoulder room. You'll be sort of jostling a little bit, but leg room, like I mentioned before, is quite good. But if you've only got 2 in the back here, you do have a drop down armrest there that's nice and soft and cushy, and you've got a couple of cup holders as well. But overall, this second row is potentially even more impressive than the second row, just considering the amount of space you got and the amount of comfort you've got as well for everyday usage. Let's have a look in the boot of the Atto 3 here. Now, first thing to point out, there's an electric tailgate. Reasonably slow, but hey, it works, and you'll notice the provisional plates we've got here as well. That's because this car isn't normally registered, it is left-hand drive. But this is the boot here. BYD tells us that there is 434 litres of storage space in there. I'm not sure exactly if that is VDA or SAE, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. You can see how much space there is in here, and it's pretty decent actually. It's not a massive boot, but it's not too bad. If you have a look underneath here, you'll see that there is not a spare wheel, but there is a goo kit plus a couple of charging cables and that sort of thing. But they have told us if you do want to carry a spare wheel, you can position the boot up to be level with the lip. That could be handy if you're loading big heavy things in there that you don't want to drop down into the bottom, but you've also got room underneath there to fit something like a spare wheel, maybe even a space-saving spare or something like that. But other features you've got here, you do have a light in the back here, and you've got a couple of storage spots in each side as well, and a decent parcel shelf. So all in all, not too bad. Driving this Atto 3 on Australian roads is a unique experience. I've already mentioned before, but this is a left hook car, and part of me getting used to this car to start with was just getting used to driving on the wrong side of the road all of the time and getting my head around the visibility side of things. But I've kind of got it there now. I can drive reasonably normally and comfortably around town, and I can get a bit of a judge of what this Atto 3 is like. And so far this Atto 3 has been pretty good. Things like ride comfort are good, but they're probably not as good as some of the other more established competitors on the market, things like Hyundais and Kias. This does feel a little bit bouncy at times at lower speeds on your imperfections on the road. It's going through corners here. There's electric steering, and the electric steering is quite light. It's probably not full of feeling and that sort of thing, but it's easy to use, easy to drive around. And that's probably a more important thing for this car. The ride quality just tends to bounce a little bit over imperfections and that sort of thing. We did load the car up with 4 people before and with a boatload of camera gear in the boot, and it was probably up towards its GVM at that time. And the car was probably running out of shock absorbers at that stage, so it started to get a little bit wallowy and bouncy there as well. Most of the time, it's fine. It's not too bad. It's definitely not a basket case, this car, but it could be perhaps smoothed out and just polished a little bit more to keep up with the competition. In terms of power, you've got 150 kilowatts and 320 Newton meters there. That's fairly typical for electric cars, two-wheel drive, front-wheel drive electric vehicles. And similar to those other cars, this is actually surprisingly brisk to drive around town. 320 Newton meters isn't a huge amount, but it's definitely solid. But the fact that that torque is accessible almost instantly means you've got good acceleration for when you need it around town. Now, we've only had a short period of time with this Atto 3, and this is an evaluation vehicle. It's still left-hand drive, so naturally we can't give our full verdict on this car just yet. We will wait until we get the Australian delivered right-hand drive model in full spec before we do that. However, it's an interesting first taste in this car, and so far it does seem quite good. Some things that I like about this car is the interior. It's definitely a little bit different and unique. Some might call it quirky, but there is some cool technology going in there. It seems to be quite practical as well for everyday usage. Build quality as well is okay, and I do like the size of the second row. It's actually fairly spacious in there, so if you did want to use this for a family car, this could be a good candidate. And of course, you can't get around that price either. At $44,790 before on roads, this is one of the cheapest EVs on the market for sure, and it doesn't seem to feel too cheap, which I think is a very important thing for the Australian market. So stay tuned for this Atto 3 because it could be an interesting one to look at. And of course, if you want to know more about this BYD Atto 3 or in fact any other car, new car on the Australian market, head over to Drive.com.au for just about everything you need. And of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe because we put all of our videos up on there and you want to be notified if we get some new stuff happening and some cool new videos. So don't forget to subscribe.